What do you want your child to know about you if you weren't here to tell them yourself?
I would want them to know that I love them and that I care deeply for them and that I did the best I could in life, in my profession, to try to help as many people as possible. We all have our own shortcomings, but I think that as a physician, you get to affect a lot of people's lives, and when you try your hardest, you can leave a legacy that they can be proud of. So it's a very difficult question in terms of who should be your durable power of attorney. It should be someone that you know will have your best interests in mind, who knows you well, and who has the fortitude to make these tough decisions at 2 o'clock in the morning when a doctor calls and says, "What do you want us to do? Do you want us to do CPR? Do you want us to shock him?" And these are all difficult decisions, and so it's vitally important that you find somebody that you could trust to make this decision for you.
Tonight, I don't want you guys just to say that I love you to your spouse. You need to say, hey, I saw something. Here's what I would like to talk about. We don't have to talk about it now, but I think that we can there's some tools out there that you can use, such as the card deck, but we need to go to a place where you can make it lighthearted. Maybe, a Saturday afternoon, you're at a park, dinner, like drink, whatever it is to have these conversations, because the silence in a hospital room can be more deadly than not having the conversations before this. If you were unconscious in a hospital right now, who would be making life or death decisions for you? Would they know what you want? Would they even be able to make the right call? Most people assume their spouse or their parents would handle it, but that's an assumption that can be devastating. Today, we are talking about medical power of attorneys. What is it, why it matters, and why your closest loved ones might not be the best choice. 80% of Americans do not have a medical power of attorney. In one study, 30% of proxies made decisions their loved ones wouldn't have wanted them to make. Joining us today is Dr. Peter Tran, a physician who has seen what happens when families are unprepared. So this is my friend, and I know him as Peter. So I need you guys to call him Dr. Tran, and I'm going to be referring to him as Peter because this is my friend, and these conversations that I've had with him often has just been very helpful. But before I actually bring you in to just tell a little bit about yourself, I want to first start off by saying thank you for your support. Thank you for your guidance. Thank you for showing up. You have really stood in the gap in the most hardest time of my life. And that's why I call you a friend. So thank you. All right. So I want to jump in and just start off by just telling them a little bit about yourself, about your background, what you do, and let's go from there.
Okay, well, I am a board-certified general cardiologist. I've been in practice for almost 18 years. I did most of my training in Houston, Texas, where I'm originally from. But for the last almost 18 years, I've been practicing in the Bay Area in Northern California. I see patients in the clinic and in the hospital, and unfortunately, I see them towards the end of their lives at times. And that's given me a lot of experience and a different perspective in terms of how decisions are made when end-of-life events occur.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, which now having context, just have been in a situation and just knowing you for all these years, I will say this, like when they say like musicians are like true professionals, you are an absolute true professional, because what I know that you see on a day-to-day basis and what I just saw in just the amount of time that I saw, and that is what you see on a day-to-day basis, for you to still have the ability to have the joy, the heart, the laughter. I mean, it takes a very special person to be able to carry that, because you're not just carrying that for one person, you're carrying that for multiple people on a daily basis, week in, week out, year round. So, I applaud you for that.
It is a tough job at times, but there's also a lot of joys in it too when a patient has a success story and comes through.
So kind of just to dive in and follow up on that. So could you share one of your stories or experiences where you have seen where the medical power of attorney caused like harm and confusion because it wasn't in place?
Well, I mean, there are hundreds of stories that I can tell you over my 18-year career. But one story sticks out early in my career. There was a young couple, both of them healthy. The patient or husband was on a bike ride with his friends, and he collapsed. He had bystander CPR, EMS was called, and they took him to our hospital. He was having a heart attack, so we went in and opened up the blockage and put a stent in. Unfortunately, the amount of time that he was down, where his heart was not beating and pumping blood to the brain, led to what we call an anoxic brain injury, meaning that he was mostly brain dead. Now, obviously, this is a young couple, both of them healthy, and so they had never had any discussions about what to do if something like this were to happen. The patient was comatose for several weeks. His wife was making decisions for him, and they had just been married, so it was very difficult for her to let go. And so, he lingered for several weeks in the ICU and then was transferred to another hospital. She felt that she was doing what he would have wanted, but it was clear that she was not prepared for such a devastating event in their lives. And I think that led to a lot of inappropriate care that he didn't benefit from. So this can happen. These types of tragic events can happen at any time.
And, I think like you're right, because even in that moment when she was in ICU and, I had no clue on, and thankfully, Dr. Friedman from Duke was very close to us and I had his personal cell phone number, which these are instances that don't often happen where you can just call your doctor 24 hours a day around the clock and he answers no matter what time it is. I mean, there's been times where, I've called you and it's been 2:00 in the morning and I'm on the phone with the other doctor 2:00 in the morning getting guidance. But most of the time, most people don't have that. And like, what does that feel like in that moment when like no one knows what to do or everyone thinks they knows what to do? Like, what type of chaos does that create, not only for the family, but for you who is trying to do their job at the highest level?
Yeah, it can be very distressing when you're talking to multiple family members and there's not agreement as to what to do, how aggressive to be, how far to take our medical procedures. And there's a feeling in the back of your brain or your heart that we may be doing something that would be harmful to the patient, even causing them pain, despite the fact that they're not able to be awake and tell you. And that causes a lot of stress, not just for the doctor and the medical team, but also with all the patient's family. It can be truly a devastating situation for them.
No, and that resonates a lot, which as I go into my next question, because that is kind of why I believe it is so important to have these conversations, because I'm just a different type of person who has, in business, in life, I've gone through my 30 years of dealing with tremendous amount of weight that I've had to carry, and I've had to delegate, and I've had to compartmentalize certain things. But for most people, that type of weight that they have to carry, because they don't understand that in that moment, like you're dealing with family. I was dealing with a 2-year-old. I was talking to doctors from in Duke on different time zones. I was talking to ICU doctors. And that's another thing too. You're not just talking to like one doctor. You're literally talking to like 10, 15 doctors, and they are all asking you questions, some repeated questions, some things that you may not know. And all of that, you're having to make decisions. And sometimes you have to make decisions in a time where you may have 2 minutes to make a decision, or you may have 2 days to make a decision. Like, you don't know the amount of time that you have to make those decisions, because they may say, hey, we have to do this right now, or we can't do this. We need more time. And you're wanting them to make a decision now. So that's why the topic of this whole discussion, where I was saying about your wife, I don't believe, your spouse should be your power of attorney, but let's talk about the idea of your spouse or parent. Should they make these decisions? What is your thoughts on a spouse or a parent being your medical power of attorney? Because I want to hear from you, but then I'll give my thoughts on it after you, but I want to hear from your professional opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the vast majority of cases, it is the spouse that becomes automatic durable power of attorney for medical decisions. If the spouse if there's no spouse or someone available, then legally it goes to either a grown child or a parent. That's the natural progression, because it's felt that the spouse or immediate family members know the patient the best, and they know the patient's values and what the patient would have wanted. It's a very difficult question. Most people don't, as you alluded to, most people are too busy, or they feel that if they make preparations that something bad will happen. But obviously that's not the case. But most people do trust their spouses to make that decision, and they feel that. But they don't take into account the amount of stress that a spouse comes under when their loved one has an adverse medical event. And on top of that, many of the patients that I see are elderly. And so their spouses are also elderly and either medically incapable or just emotionally incapable of making those types of decisions. Grown adult children, often daughters-in-law, sons, often better at making those decisions. But again, you're talking about someone who's close to the family, so it's difficult. And a lot of times they fall back on do everything possible to save my parent's life, even when it's medically futile or we're doing things that the patient may not have wanted. So it's a very difficult question in terms of who should be your durable power of attorney. It should be someone that you know will have your best interests in mind, who knows you well, and who has the fortitude to make these tough decisions at 2:00 in the morning when a doctor calls and says, "What do you want us to do? Do you want us to do CPR? Do you want us to shock him?" And these are all difficult decisions, and so it's vitally important that you find somebody that you could trust to make these decisions for you.
Yeah, and I think, and I agree with you, obviously 1,000%. And I guess my perspective on it from my experience is these are some of the things that we don't think about when you're in this position. People, especially, and like you said, dealing with the older community, but when you are in between the ages of 27 and 45, like you are thinking you still have your whole life ahead of you. So it's making a decision about life or death in that moment is not something that most people don't think about. But the other thing I don't think people think about is grief doesn't start after. Grief starts during that time. So you're grieving and having to make decisions in a time of grief, because you are grieving the what could have been, even while they're still here. And even in that moment, you're having to make decisions based upon what you still are holding on to. But once again, because I had the guidance that I had, and I had the ability to separate that, when I was talking to the doctor and he was saying, because they were asking me, do you have a do not resuscitate order in place? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And they were like, if she stops breathing, do you want us to bring her back? And the doctor said, listen, I know you both, and I know her. You bringing her back is going to cause more damage and harm than it would be to allowing her to take the natural path and the natural course, because you don't know, bringing her back. And it's weird. It reminds me of Avengers and like the Age of Ultron, when they had to bring back one of the Jarvis, and they had to bring him back because he had gone, but the Jarvis that they brought back wasn't the same Jarvis. And that was the thing, is like me bringing my wife back, she already had brain complications, and there was probably going to be a 99% chance that her bringing her back, she was going to be a vegetable. She would be brain dead, or they would collapse her lungs, or there's more harm and pain that she would have had gone through if they would have brought her back. But I know that us having that conversation and me just knowing her, I know the life and what she would want it for her, the state that she would want her son to be in. And because that's another thing too, having a small child, that trauma that the child has to see and go through, which impacts him, he already is going to have layers unpacked. And that's a whole nother layer that you're adding on to it. But once again, not having these conversations beforehand, I think it can create a domino effect of things that are going to need to be unpacked from a person, a parent, or a child, by not having these type of conversations. So when it comes to a medical power of attorney, and once again, Everybody listening, I always, always, always tell you, this is not the next question I'm going to ask him, because I want him to give us a perspective, a professional perspective and opinion from a doctor, but this is not legal advice. So before you make any decisions with your spouse, with your family, always consult a legal professional to make sure you are making the correct decisions based upon your current situation, because everybody's situation is different. We're just going to talk through just the steps of what we believe can qualify a person to make them a strong, reliable power of attorney. So, and before I even ask that question, have you ever seen a situation where having a power of attorney really made a difference in the dynamic of dealing with you and the family?
Yeah, so that happens all the time. When there's a durable power of attorney, things go much more smoothly. If a patient has a durable power of attorney, then we often talk to them, and then they talk to the rest of the family, and that allows the family to be heard, but at the same time not cause confusion by having too many voices giving their perspective. So it's always much better when a patient cannot speak for themselves to have one person designated. As you alluded to before, there's many doctors and many different specialists in the care of a sick patient, and having one person to rely on from the family to discuss the ongoing care and what our plans are is makes our lives tremendously easier, and it makes the care of the patient much better, because it decreases the risk that we're doing something that the patient would not have wanted, or it's causing pain, or providing care that's futile.
And also, too, it prevents the telephone game, because if you have multiple people talking to multiple doctors, you're always going to get diluted information that can really affect the decision and path of going forward. And I know that when people are listening to this and we're talking about, like, multiple doctors, I'm telling you that in the span of dealing with my wife, from the moment she was diagnosed to the day that she ended up taking her last breath, nurses and doctors, I have probably dealt with at least 100, because you're dealing with doctors, practitioners. It depends on if you're at a hospital where it's a student hospital. So you're dealing with people that are coming in, like nurses, and then every department, like there's so many that you're dealing with. And there was a time when her mom was getting information, and then I was getting information, and then her mom was trying to make decisions and influence. And I was like, well, let me talk to the doctor, because I hear what you're saying, but I need to talk to them to be clear on this is what the situation actually is. And I understand that you're doing your research, and that's great, but I need to talk to the doctors directly, and that I can give the information and pass down and so forth. So, okay, when it comes to choosing of what we would think from our own personal opinions of what we believe would be the qualified person for power of attorney, I want to give them some actionable steps. So what would you say would be the first step of choosing the right person?
Well, again, everybody's a little bit different. Some people would automatically go to their spouse or their adult children. Other people that would qualify would be siblings that you're close to, parents if you feel that they're not too elderly or frail, and then close lifelong friends. And it's a very personal decision. You just look at everybody in your life, and you have to make maybe make some decisions as to what group of friends or family that you want to even consider. Narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3, and then look at each of them, and do they have the emotional and mental capacity to make these type of decisions when the time comes. And then once you make that decision, you don't want to just write it down somewhere and not let them know. You want to make sure that they're aware that if something happens, that they'll be getting a phone call. And the most important thing to make sure that your wishes are honored and to take the pressure off of them would be to talk to them about what you want done. When you do that, that takes a lot of pressure off of them. My brother told me that he did not want to have this done, but he wants this done. That takes the emotional toll away from this person that you're entrusting with your care. Yeah. So in some cases, there are people who are not in the family who are designated as a durable power of attorney, and that's fine too. As long as you make sure that your spouse, your adult children realize that this is your decision, and that you want them, the family, to respect your decision and to honor your wishes that this person be your power of attorney. And having said that, any durable power of attorney, if they're worth their salt, should be consulting with your family and your friends and providing them information as to what's going on when they get information from the doctors.
Yeah. And that's good. And, so based upon my situation with my brother and how he was handling my wife, which wasn't even his wife, I was like, I mean, he's a complete maniac. And I was like, man, like, listen. And it almost caused a division in our relationship because of how hard he was fighting for her. But I was like, hey, if I'm Floyd Mayweather and I'm in the biggest fight of my life, I'm going to want Mayweather Sr. in my corner fighting for me. And that's who I had actually named my power of attorney, which is my brother. It's not going to be my kids. It's not going to be, whoever my spouse in the future is going to be. It's going to be my brother, because I understand. And I've had the experience of going through him, of how he would fight to get the right information. But also too, I think, and this is something that a tip for people that are listening, like if you have other people that are in the medical field and you have people that love you and you can trust their opinion, create a document that are advisors where they could actually reach out to and get clarification on some things, because 99% of the stuff that they're going to tell you, you're not going to understand. And you have to still make a decision, even if you don't understand it. It's not like you just can't, it's like, I'm not going to make a decision, because you have to make a decision. And I think that by putting that in place and having, through whether if it's family members or relationships with people, to be able to get that counsel is going to serve you well. So when it comes to having the conversation about being a medical power of attorney, like what would you say are two things that can be conversation starters, or how do they approach the person and saying, hey, I've been thinking about this X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. What I would generally say is that, when you obviously you have to have a close relationship to the person you're asking to be your durable power of attorney, and so that makes it obviously easier from the start. I would reassure them that that you're not expecting anything to happen right away, but this is just an insurance policy, so that your last wishes and expectations are met. And then if they agree to do that, then I would have a long and deep conversation about what it means to be a DPOA, meaning you have to make the difficult decisions, and what decisions might come. When to take you off the ventilator, when to stop medications, when not to do surgery. And so, you have to have some degree of specifics to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you're just leaving your DPOA to fend for themselves and make decisions, which is unfair. And they may make a decision that you may not agree with, but you're not able to communicate. So in general, I would just have a long, deep conversation about what you want in these moments, and hopefully they understand. And it also helps to have it written down. You have a conversation with somebody, and a year or 2 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years goes by, and in the heat of the moment, it's not likely that they're going to remember everything you told them. So it has to be written down, and that can make it even scarier when things are written down. But it makes it easier when the time comes, when what if happens.
Yeah, and I think it makes it scarier, but it is necessary. And as we kind of navigate out of this topic, I just want to say that for you guys that are watching this, you want to get so you want to form for the power of attorney for your state. But before you fill out that form, I'm just going to say I would recommend that you speak with maybe your primary doctor, or you speak with your legal counsel, and you have them walk you through exactly kind of the conversation we're talking about, so you know exactly what to expect and how to then start thinking about that. Because the thing is, you don't have to do this on your own. And I know that there's not a lot of conversations that are happening around this, but there are people that can help navigate you through this to make those decisions the best way. So
okay. I actually have a copy of the California one. It's called a PULSE form, Physician Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And you fill this out. You have your family and durable power of attorney review with you, and you have your doctor review with you. So often patients or people fill out these forms, and then they put it in their safe deposit box where it doesn't do anybody any good. You have to get this to your physician and to your family. We even recommend that you make a copy of it and put it in your nightstand. So if somebody's looking through your effects to see if there's any information that they can find on you, then they will see that. And this is basically your medical last will that your durable power of attorney and your family, if you don't have a durable power of attorney, can use to guide them in case something like this happens.
And thank you for that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because organization is key in the storm. Like it is key, because knowing where to go, what to get, where it's at, giving those instructions, like lack of conversations is what causes chaos, and lack of preparation is what causes division. So having that organized and having those forms, like I know that there has to be other forms according to your state. And once again, your doctors can provide you with that information. Like you have the people in your life that you can go and get those specific resources from. You just have to, you just have to be willing to separate the feeling from the preparation, because that feeling can delay your preparation. But when the what if happens, like we don't know when that can be, and we don't have control over that.
That's true. Preparation is key because you don't want to find yourself unprepared, because the amount of information going through your brain is immense.
And I can attest to that. But before we do close, I want to shift a little bit, and I want to talk to you as a husband and a father, and I want to get your insight on your professional legacy. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and most of you guys watching at this time know that we have the When Would Have Happens legacy card deck. And this deck was created to make these conversations a lot more lighthearted, and at the same time help, encourage people and encourage families to just start taking those first steps. So I got a few questions for you.
Ready.
All right. So what do you want your child to know about you if you weren't here to tell them yourself?
I would want them to know that I love them, and that I care deeply for them, and that I did the best I could in life, in my profession, to try to help as many people as possible. We all have our own shortcomings, but I think that as a physician, you get to affect a lot of people's lives, and when you try your hardest, you can leave a legacy that you can be that they can be proud of.
That's good, because I believe that either you either have the conversations like this to write your legacy, or somebody's going to write the legacy for you. There will be a legacy written, and most of the time, which is crazy, that the legacy is actually created by the actions that happen after you are here, because you're not there to actually speak upon those things. So people start to create their own ideas of it. So the second question is, if something happened to you tomorrow, what decisions would you want your wife to feel confident about already?
Well, I mean, if something were to have to be, knock on wood, then I would want my wife to be able to be the decision to end my life if further medical care was futile. And I would want her to do that without feeling guilty, without the guilt or the shame of having to make that decision if the doctors told her that there was no chance of a meaningful recovery. If oftentimes we're able to get a patient's heart started again. We're able to put them on a ventilator to breathe for them. We give them a feeding tube to give them nutrition through their stomach or their IVs, but the brain is gone. And having somebody on a ventilator for months and years at a time, that's not a life. We don't know how much they can perceive. We don't know what pain, if any, they're feeling. And so we want to make sure, I want to make sure that my wife is able to make that decision for me, but not feel the guilt. Because I think a lot of times people feel guilty, and so they want everything done. They want futile care sustained. And if that's not in the patient's best wishes, then the durable power of attorney should have that ability to make that decision without bearing that burden for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Which, brings me to like the last question. So what conversations do you hope to have with your family now so they never have to guess later?
Yeah. I've spoken to my wife and then also my sister, who happens to be an attorney. And I told them what types of care I would be willing to have. A lot of times we hear from durable power of attorney, if I need to be on a ventilator for a certain period of time, then that's okay. But if the doctors come to you and tell you that there's no improvement, then you can make the decision to turn off the ventilator. Your wishes don't end at your funeral arrangements. So when COVID started, I told my sister I wanted to be cremated and be buried here. And she said, well, what else? And then she started asking me about 20 other questions that I had not even considered, even though I'd been a physician for about 15 years. So, it's difficult, but it has to be a long-ranging series of conversations. I didn't mention this before, but one conversation is usually not enough. You have to have follow-up conversations, and things that are left unsaid and undone need to be resolved before something like this happens to you. So I have my wife and my siblings to make that decision for me. God forbid something happens.
Before we get out of here, I know that this genre and these topics and the things that we talk about on this podcast, it sounds taboo for most people because obviously based upon just how we have grown up and our parents, like these are things that just were never talked about. And just because we don't talk about them doesn't mean that they will never happen. And because the when would have happens to everybody, it's just a matter of when. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I can tell you that me and my wife had a lot of conversations. There's a lot of conversations that we didn't have, but because of specific conversations that we did have, it did prepare me to understand how to move forward after the situation. But I can tell you that just because we choose to avoid this conversation doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And I just want to encourage everybody to really, and even if that means having to go to therapy and speaking with a therapist to talk through what blockages are blocking you from having these conversations, because whether you are the head of the household or you are the spouse, and especially if you're the head of the household, this is your job and your duty to prepare your family for your absence. And by you not doing that, that's what ends up creating chaos down the line, that it's just a domino effect. And I'm speaking from just personal experience. So these questions that we have gone over, it's to build clarity and peace before the storm ever hits. Tonight, I don't want you guys just to say that I love you to your spouse. You need to say, hey, I saw something. Here's what I would like to talk about. We don't have to talk about it now, but I think that we can there's some tools out there that you can use, such as the card deck, but we need to go to a place where you can make it lighthearted. Maybe, a Saturday afternoon, you're at a park, dinner, like drinks, whatever it is to have these conversations, because the silence in a hospital room can be more deadly than not having the conversations before this. Peter, I want to thank you once again for taking the time out to have this conversation, to answer these questions, and hopefully that whoever's watching this will bring some clarity and give you some understanding and basic instructions on how to actually start to put the pieces in place. Because I'm going to tell you, this is just one piece to a big puzzle. This is not the end all be all. This is one piece, but this can be a major, major piece. So for people that are watching, I don't know if you have socials or where people can find you at. If people wanted to find you, where would they find you at?
Oh, well, in terms of just advice, I think probably email probably be the best, and I'll give it to you later on. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody informally just to give them advice. But I think the advice that you've been espousing with this podcast series has been very important. Having your brother as your DPOA will take so much pressure off your son if something were to happen to you, because your brother will be prepared and your son will be able to carry out your wishes through your brother. And so as you said, the best thing is just to be prepared. And it's not just one conversation, it's a series of conversations that you have over the years. Maybe your values and your expectations will change over time. And so you just have to have a series of conversations with your power of attorney.
Well, I will put his information down, link in this video. Once again, I appreciate you guys. And remember that legacy starts from the conversations that you have, and chaos starts from the conversations that you don't. So I thank you guys for watching. Once again, Thank you, Dr. Tran. And I want you guys to tune into the next episode. Please like and subscribe and share this with everybody because this is important. So thank you, guys.